welcome to another episode of Full Build Friday, where I try to build a character from a comic, game, or similar source using the baseline rules of Pathfinder Second Edition and the Path Builder app. This came as a request, because I certainly never would have thought of it otherwise. But this week, we're looking at Brook from One Piece.
Good afternoon, yo! Thank you all for stopping by.
It is entirely unintentional that I built two bony boys back to back, but there's a bit more to this skeletal sailor than what you see at first glance. So let's take a look at some build goals. Long before he joined the Straw Hat Pirates, Brook was a pirate himself, who ate the Yomi Yomi no Mi, a devil fruit that allowed him to return from death. However, it took him a considerably long time to do this, resulting in his body being reduced to a skeleton by the time he found it. He has explored this power further, allowing him to separate his spirit from his physical body. His spirit itself exudes an extreme chill, which he can use to freeze others by flying through them, or infuse his blade with a biting cold. He's also learned to make use of his undead state, celebrating the protection it gives him, and sometimes even feigning death in the midst of a fight. Furthermore, his skeletal body makes him extraordinarily fast and light, allowing him to run across water and leap high into the air. Finally, he is a musician of the Straw Hat Pirates, and while that doesn't always come up in his fights, he has used it to create a tone able to put large groups of enemies to sleep, as well as craft illusions and manipulate emotions. That gives us a character with a wide range of capabilities and features. While his music has some mental manipulation properties, the character seems to have a greater focus on his swordsmanship and soul projection powers, especially when he combines them to a chilling effect. He also embraces his undead nature, evading damage and playing dead to throw enemies off balance. It sounds like it should make for a fun build, so let's just get into it. We're getting a little out there with Ancestry this time, and taking up the Skeleton. This is the second time I've done so for Full Build Friday, and for Brook we'll want to use the Fodder Heritage, as this will let him start with a 30-foot speed to reference his considerable swiftness. Given the way that he will play dead, Collapse is an obvious choice for Brook, giving him a reaction to collapse into a pile of bones while reducing the damage dealt to him. This manages to capture two of the main ways that Brook makes use of his skeletal state. Building into the background of our bony buccaneer, I had to settle on Sailor. There isn't directly a pirate background, but from a little bit I've gathered about the pirates of One Piece, they're more about personal freedom than just committing crimes. Sailor syncs with that while making Brook trained in athletics and sailing lore. This also nets him Underwater Marauder, but I think the fruits or something make it so that you can't swim, so this doesn't quite fit him as much as the rest of the build does. Closing in on a class for our Cadaverous Crooner, Brook takes the Magus class. This is a little bit of me wanting to explore new options, but I'm also specifically looking to play into some of his more mystical powers. We'll actually be using a new hybrid study for Brook with the Aloof Firmament. Though, admittedly, you could also go Laughing Shadow if that's more your speed. I went for Aloof Firmament because it's a new thing to show off. This lets him fall from great heights, jump great distances, and transfer that momentum into his strikes for some extra damage. It requires him to wield his sword one-handed, which works fine with the sword cane that he will be using as his weapon. With the Sky Laughs at Waves focus spell that it provides, he can go soaring across the battlefield to deliver these blows, calling to mind the way that he is able to jump and leap about with amazing ability. With all that these class features grant him, he doesn't receive a class feat, but does also get a few spells. And at this point, I gotta be a little honest, I think the remaster really hurt the Magus. You have to reach into the Premaster to add Ray of Frost to his cantrips, giving him a chilling spell to infuse his blade with for Arcane Cascade. You can also pick up Warp Step, which will let him speed himself up a bit. From his first rank spells, Briny Bolt is more effective, but doesn't quite match his theme of ice, whereas Snowball kind of sucks, but is at least on theme. He doesn't get a lot of skills here, being trained in Arcana due to his class, and then also receiving training in Acrobatics, Diplomacy, and of course, Performance. We'll be using Dexterity as Brook's primary ability score, but our Mighty Musician is also going to need some Charisma so that he can really put on a show. While we've got that undead aspect nailed down for Brook, we're actually a little lacking in his ability to extend his soul beyond himself, or at least beyond his blade for the time being. To capture that, we can tap into the Wraith Demon abilities at second level, or Ghostly Grasp, letting him extend his soul to get a little poltergeisty with it, reaching out to slam windows shut, push doors open, or even retrieve items for him. Then, our chosen skill feat is thematic with additional lore, ensuring that Brook has scaling proficiency in the music lore skill. In addition to reflecting his role as the crew's main musician, it also references his musical stardom during the time when the party split up. Brook also learns another first rank spell, which could be used for Fleet Step, helping to make him even faster. In that same vein, I will say that one of the benefits behind going for the Laughing Shadow hybrid study is the enhanced speed that it grants. Taking Fleet as Brook's 3rd level general feat helps to close that gap a bit more and makes him faster than most party members by a good 10 feet. The skill increase makes him an expert in athletics before we start looking at 2nd rank spells. Regrettably, I wouldn't say there's anything super crucial here, but Elemental Zone lets him create an area to enhance his ice effects, similar to the way that he's able to chill the area around him. For 4th level, we're looking at Distant Water Bird's Poise, a feat unique to the Aloof Firmament hybrid study. This lets him flip between foes with a mere reaction, demonstrating his swiftness in part because it even lets him stand upon the surface of water, even if only for a few seconds. Now while this lets him leap around quickly, and Arcane Cascade gives him Quick Jump, I want to make that effect more readily available, which is why we'll be taking it as his skill feat for this level, helping him bound great distances quickly. But for those distances that he wants to keep foes away from him, Brook can use Well Armed as his ancestry feat at 5th level. This allows him to detach an arm to extend his reach, but notably means that he doesn't have a free hand while he's doing this. So this is good to get off a surprise hit, fool around with foes, or keep a little bit of distance between Brook and his enemy, but he'll have to reattach his limb if he wants to make full use of his Arcane Cascade, which does require a free hand. Speaking of arcane arts, Haste is really the only standout spell for Brook here, as it will make him faster, but that isn't too terrible. It just means that we have more slots that we could heighten other spells too. We also have 2 skill increases at this level. The first comes naturally from his class and makes him an expert in acrobatics, while the other comes from a boost to his intelligence and makes him trained in society. We aren't quite done with skill increases even as we move into 6th level, because this allows Brook to take up a Bard dedication. While I don't think he uses music enough to make it a core part of his class, it is, nevertheless, an important part of his character, and one that he has used to extraordinary effect. We'll take the Maestro Muse, given his focus on music, and will become trained in Deception and Occultism. For the 2 cantrips he gains from it, I personally favor Haunting Hymn and Musical Accompaniment, for entirely flavorful reasons. Other than that, we're looking at Powerful Leap for his skill feat, allowing him to jump and bound even further, which synergizes very well with the Aloof Firmament aspects of his kit. Aside from extending the range of his jumps, it, perhaps most importantly, will give him a fantastic vertical. With as light as Brook is on his feet, Feather Step as his 7th level general feat shouldn't come as any surprise. It's an easy pickup that will be accompanied by a skill increase to Athletics to make him a master in this skill. We will follow on that Athletics mastery with Water Sprint as his 8th level skill feat. As we know from our build goals, stripped of all the meaty bits, Brook is fast and light enough to race across the surface of the water. And while Distant Waterbird's Poise played into that, this will let him expand upon it. And while Brook may be able to treat water as a nearly solid ground, I'm not quite as sure on this level's class feat. I took Runic Impression with the idea that Brook could infuse his blade with a Frost Rune, ensuring greater cold damage from it. But another good option here is an early pickup of basic Bard spellcasting. That's an option already in our lineup, so we'll discuss that further when we actually get to it. 9th level gives us a pretty important ancestry feat with Rejuvenation Token, which will let Brook impart a piece of his consciousness into a precious item, though it does still require some action on the part of his compatriots. So, it's not quite perfect for his Devil Fruit, but perfect is just a goal to chase. Just like Brook starts tracing Occultism proficiency with his skill increase, becoming an expert in the questionable craft for casters. We return to our roots with a Wraith Deviant power at level 10, taking Distant Wandering to represent Brook's ability to project his spirit from his physical body. This effect is kind of limiting, but it is a great way to do some scouting or things like just checking around corners where hostiles might be. If you're looking for some more ways to wander the wide world, there's also Wall Jump as Brook's skill feat. fitting a similar idea as many of the other jumping and movement options we've seen from him. As a final note, a boost to his intelligence here makes him trained in stealth, which feels a bit more on theme for a pirate than some of his other picks. Pertaining to the particulars of piracy, our Pallid Performer punches in a home in every port as his general feat at 11th level. This brings to mind a bit of his celebrity status, as well as the general goodwill that the Straw Hat Pirates have earned. You could take up Phantom Orchestra as one of his 6th rank spells here if you want to play more into that. Otherwise, just take up any ice spell or attack spell that strikes your fancy, which have been slim pickings on my end. Rounding out this level is another skill increase to Occultism, making him a master of it. Finally, at 12th level, Brook grabs Basic Bard Spellcasting, which immediately fills his available spell repertoire, and hits a lot of options we're looking for. First rank has Sleep, which we will signature so that he can use his Namur Yuda Flung to lull foes into a deep slumber. Then, second rank has Calm, allowing him to manipulate emotions and steal the desire to fight from those that mean him harm. Finally, he has Hypnotize to confound the senses of enemies. It isn't quite the illusion that he wove the new Fishmen Pirates into, but it's a step towards that concept. Now, if you instead took this earlier in place of Runic Impression, I'd grab Greater Awakened Power, so that he can add the enhanced fly speed to his Distant Wandering. As for his skill feat here, Fascinating Performance gets in on the mental manipulation our Merry Musician has been amassing. It's an iffy ability. Fascinated certainly isn't useful in combat, but it could be a great way for Brook to provide a distraction for his companions during some out-of-combat shenanigans. While Brook has no skin left to save, Skeletal Resistance at 13th level nets him some resistances, while also resembling the way that Brook is very difficult to put down, thanks to his undead nature. It's a nice little fit, but not the only one, because this level finally unlocks 7th rank spells. And man, this is one I've just been waiting on. Brook can't spell strike with Frigid Flurry, but he doesn't need to when he wants to use it to resemble his ability to send his soul out through people and afflict them with a terrible chill. It then lets him reconnect with his body at the end of this effect, as demonstrated by the winds of this flurry carrying him into a flanking position. It is just a very fun spell, and a particularly appropriate one for Brook, at least based off what I know of the character. All of that is followed by him becoming an expert in the performance skill. He's got his musical lore scaling, but this will open him up to some new potential skill feats and make him more likely to pull off a fascinating performance. At his 14th level, I was drawn to Hasted Assault to give him a focus spell that will give him Quicken, again calling to mind his incredible speed and swiftness. While he can use this to run circles around enemies, he could also use Distracting Performance to draw the focus of his foes, making it easier for his own allies to get the jump on them or otherwise outmaneuver other crews. Now, an important aspect to some of this debuffing that we've slipped into Brook's kit is laying it out before enemies can react. An incredible initiative as his 15th level general feat plays right into that concept. But if it's looking like a bit more serious fight, Brook's 8th rank spells finally give him another cold spell with the attack trait in the form of Polar Ray. This means he'll be able to spell strike with this, which in turn means he'll be able to leave an enemy drained in addition to the cold damage from it. Fitting for our Deathly Dandy. With spells secured, he selects skills with Legendary Athletics and an int boost to become trained in Intimidation. For Brook's 16th level, we'll take Expert Bard Spellcasting, with the most notable spell here being Hallucination, which you'll want to signature due to its incapacitation trait. But this is the spell that will allow him to manipulate the perceptions of other creatures, as he did with the new Fishmen Pirates, especially once he can heighten it to 6th and 8th rank to affect a greater multitude of creatures. Otherwise, I'd look for spells that play into his more spiritual side, like Spirit Blast. Then, Brook himself will play into being a bard, with impressive performance allowing him to use his performance to make friends, since he has at least invested a tiny bit more into that than the almost nothing that he has put into his diplomacy. As the last ancestry feat for Brook, we'll use Play Dead. Collapse might let him look like a pile of bones to dodge a crit, but this allows him to really sell it, even if he hasn't done much to improve his deception skill. On the topic of skills, he will take an increase to Occultism, making him a legend in it so that in turn he can take Master Bard Spellcasting. This gives him a chance to finally signature Calm, but will also grant him an 8th rank spell slot that he can prepare Hallucination into, making it into an unending phantasmagorium for his audience, whether they want it or not. Potentially more important to the character, or at least one that expands his abilities rather than just letting him cast higher ranked spells, is the Cloud Jump skill feat. This is the final form of jumping. Brook is getting up there with Superman, being able to leap, well, maybe not tall, but certainly buildings in a single bound. But should those jumps go awry and this Osseous Orchestrator take a nasty tumble, we have Die Hard as his general feat at 19th level. This just feels right for Brook, given the way he survived for years as a spirit even while his body withered, and he hasn't given up yet. One truly final skill increase then makes him a legend in performance, though you could also go acrobatics if that's more your speed. Brook may be far from his own end, but we are coming up on the end of this build. Our final class feat will be Supreme Spell Strike, to make Brook permanently quickened, again based on the astounding speed and swiftness that he demonstrates. While this extra action can only be used to strike or recharge a spell strike, it may feel a little redundant with Hasted Assault. If you do feel that way, go ahead and take that Greater Awakened power for flight on Distant Wandering, like I said before. Finalizing the basics of this build is the Legendary Professional Skill feat, to represent the success that Brook found as a musician and superstar during the time that the Straw Hats were apart. But what's an artist without a little bit of accompaniment? For that, we'll use the free archetype rule to get the Bard dedication way sooner and stack up its feats and spells much faster. In addition to the ones already chosen here, Occult Breath would give him more castings, and then you can seek out some feats that feel right for him. Or you could play into his fencing style, and use a Duelist dedication along with any of its feats that fit your fancy. We're coming to the close of this concert, so why don't we have an encore and look at what we've built so far? Brook is a fodder skeleton magus who uses a Lu Firmament hybrid study and has the sailor background to reflect his life as a pirate. He invests in performance and is a maestro muse to cover his role as a musician, while his humble sword cane stands in nicely for Brook's weapon, Soul Solid. The power of his Yomi Yomi no Mi to control and manipulate his own soul can be seen with some deviant feats such as Ghostly Grasp and Distant Wanderings, and a Greater Awakened power if you can squeeze that in. This route also allowed him to return to life, but only after his flesh had rotted away, leaving him as his skeleton ancestry. The deathly chill and cold of his soul that he can extend to his blade comes from his spells as a magus, such as Ray of Frost, Snowball, or the Ladder Polar Ray, as well as Arcane Cascade after he casts one of these spells. He can also just exude this chill around him with Elemental Zone, or send his soul flying through and freezing foes with Frigid Flurry. His skeletal ancestry makes it harder for normal attacks to affect him with skeletal resistance, while blows that would normally kill can be evaded with Collapse and then play dead to confound his enemies. His heritage enhances his speed, along with his fleet feet, and Water Sprint makes him fast enough to run across water, while his Hybrid Study allows him to land on it after a leap. This study also lets him just jump incredibly, with effects further bolstered by the likes of Cloud Jump. He turns to his Bard dedication and its spells to gain sleep for his Namur Yuta Flank. Calm grants him the ability to manipulate the emotion of his enemies, and he can use Hallucination to trap others in a grand illusion, just as he did with the new Fishman Pirates. In short, this superb singer strikes and slashes at sinister sailors even while simply a skeleton, setting his spirit to suspend suspects in a sudden snow. Before I dip, the votes are in and the next remaster build will be for Set the Boss from League of Legends. This should be coming out in October, so look forward to it. As for this build, we've come to the end. Please let me know what you think of this build or the video itself with a comment. I'm always happy to discuss builds or just try to improve what I'm doing. If you like this build, want to see the others I've done, or just join in on the discussion of upcoming builds, check out the Monster Monday blog, Twitter, or Discord, which are all linked in the description. Other than that, thanks for watching and have a fantastic Friday.
Soul King だぜ